R.I.P. Captain Barkey. Some idiot boy over the weekend murdered Captain Barkey because he was banging the dude's ex. And this dude must have deducted that there are no more women in the world. Apparently he made several threats that he was going to do this. You know what I mean? Fucking faggot. What a pussy. And when the woman filed a restraining order against him, he apparently spiraled into a dark and sinister mood, you know what I mean? After he had a menstrual cycle or a period. You know how these pussies are, you know what I mean? Can't help themselves. He shot and murdered Captain Barkey. What a fucking pussy. You know what I mean? This happened in New York over the weekend. But anyway, let's get this shit rolling. Now, what I want to do is play a little transcript of a heavyweight boxer from the 60s. His name is Billy Walker. He's a Londoner. He was a very popular boxer and a massive ticket seller. I just want you to listen to what he says.
I think anybody that takes it up knows the risks, and they accept them. And you accept you know you're going to get hurt physically. You're going to get your nose busted and maybe your eyes cut and things like that. Well, these things happen, and you know this. But brain damage, it's never been proven, and there's a lot of medical different of opinions on this subject. And if I thought for one moment that my brain was being damaged, I would turn the game in. But brain damage, it's never been proven, but brain damage, it's never been proven, but brain damage, it's never been proven.
Billy Walker was a product of his times. Like, this was an era when they were just beginning to start running tests that would turn up conclusive proof that boxing correlated to brain damage. And because they were new findings, the people who were advocating for the right of boxing to have a position in society were saying, they're talking fucking bollocks. Fuck them. It's not true. So they would defend it. And the average layperson, he doesn't have any medical facts to back up his argument. So what will he say? He'll say something like, well, boxing took me off the streets. If I didn't do boxing, I'd have been fucking robbing banks. And that would be his argument. He wouldn't have no empirical medical data to dispute their findings, right? So his only argument would be a social one. His only argument would be, well, my mate Terry boxed for 20 years and he's still here. He's all right. I'm all right. That would be their only argument. But him and Terry is just not a vast enough number to make a study or survey to debunk the findings of what these medical professionals were turning up. There was a stage when people thought cigarettes were actually good for them. And then they found out they wasn't. And then when they started making the mentholated, minty tasting cigarettes, these ones are healthy. Then that gets debunked. Right? And now you have alternative cigarettes, electric cigarettes. What the fuck? Who knows what they're going to say about that in a few years or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Best thing to do is just not smoke. Right?
Well, the most important organ in the body is the brain. And the most important medical question then in boxing is whether it damages the brain. And there's no doubt that it does so. And although there's some argument as to how exactly that damage is caused, it's probably related to the fact that the brain is a gelatinous organ.
That excerpt came from the 60s. And you could hear the two bullet points in the doctor's case was there are some arguments. And then he said there's a debate on certain factors of trying to disprove his findings, you know? So people were making arguments and debates against it. And what you have to realize is there was a whole lot at stake if these findings came out. Boxing was massive in the 60s in Britain, and I mean in a lot of other countries, right? It takes a back seat now to sports like football, but them times it was on an equal billing, yeah? Look, let's just put two and two together. There were very competent and intelligent doctors who, after all their years of training, would have known more than enough about the human body and the brain, you know? They knew for years the correlation between taking punches in your head and brain damage. But a lot of them doctors probably enjoyed watching boxing. They probably enjoyed smoking and drinking just as much as the public did, because there wasn't such a statement against the things that are supposedly bad for us, you know? And today, the nanny state that we live in is always trying to tell us, don't do this, don't do that, you know, getting in your business, telling you what to do, you know what I mean? But them days, the doctors, they knew the potential social implications if the findings were made official. Yes, boxing causes brain damage. There's lots of industries that people in the medical profession, maybe willingly or unwillingly, were forced to protect. Alcohol, cigarettes, fatty foods, you know what I mean? And shit like that. What you have to realize, alcohol and cigarette advertisement was nothing back in the day. You used to see actors advertising cigarettes on the television, alcohol, newspapers, magazines, radio, billboard posters, the lot. But now, all of that has been marginalized heavily, yeah? They're even thinking of making cigarettes without no fancy packaging. Just a bland box. They're actually thinking of doing that now. Just to take away any notion that smoking could be attractive. They might have to do that with alcohol as well. There was people's livelihoods at stake. And in the 60s, British boxing was going through changes because just like now, the technological advancement of the world, you know, it brings changes to our lives. And the fact that television was televising a lot of boxing, a lot of the promoters were pissed, right? Because people were sitting inside their yards and watching the boxing instead of buying a ticket and watch the fight live. Promoters, managers, boxers, they did not want to accept these new findings. They didn't want to accept it. Deep down, they knew that. But once again, the technological advancements in medicine and the improvement in researching any matters related to the brain and neurological function just meant that ignorance was about to get overwhelmed, right? Knocked out. You get what I'm saying? There are no people in 2012 with any credibility in the medical field who say there is not a correlation, right, from taking punches to your head and brain damage. There's not one. There's not one allowed to work in the Western diaspora. Not one. The only arguments for boxing now are social ones. There is no medical argument anywhere. So we always say these fighters them days were brave. Well, yeah, they were brave, but to a degree, it comes down to a case of ignorance is bliss, because they didn't think that no harm could come to them, or they didn't think that they was doing any damage to themselves by boxing, even though they was going through neurological ailments like headaches, you know, and other shit. They're not medical people. Like, a lot of the times, until a doctor tells you something, your body doesn't let you accept it. Even though your body's feeling the pain, until you get a clinical diagnosis, you don't accept. Or you tell yourself, nah, you haven't got cancer. Nah, Me? Diabetes? Nah. You haven't got this, you haven't got that ailment. That's what you do. That's what people do. We stay in denial and you soldier on. Especially men, like, we'll carry all sorts and types of ailments and injuries and we won't go doctor. We won't go doctor. I mean, how much of you brothers out there going to get the prostate exam? I mean, because I'm not in no hurry to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Just after the war, people were hungry for entertainment. Freddie Mills never failed to provide it, as long as you could stomach the degree of punishment which was then thought acceptable.
The reason why a lot of the old school fighters are eulogized and immortalized is that the medical ideology of them days and before that, I mean, that was the 40s, you know what I mean? Like, boy, you go back to when Jack Dempsey was hammering Jess Willard and standing behind him. No 8 count or nothing. Man stood behind his back, and as soon as he got back up on one, he would off, thump him back down. No neutral corner, you know. You know what I mean? No neutral corner. Dread. The ideology back in the day allowed fighters to fight brutal wars, so their names would be eulogized and immortalized. Yeah? The ideology gave the fighters a freedom, if you like, to become ring legends. Let's take the Mike Alvarado-Brendan Rios fight. Alvarado wanted the chance to prove that he was heroic, like a throwback fighter, like Archie Moore, when he got off the floor about 7 times against, is it the Canadian guy, Darrell, and he came back and won. He wanted that chance. He didn't get it. The referee stopped the bout. And most of you guys say it was premature. Let me tell you this now. If that fight was for any time, I don't know, just pick an era that's not post-millennium or 90s, you know, it would never have been stopped. That bout would never have been stopped in the 60s or 70s, probably, you know what I mean? That's the point. I mean, imagine if Chavez Jr. and Martinez had 3 more rounds to go. If it was a 15-rounder, you know? Who knows? You could say, possibly, that Chavez Jr. was robbed by 20 years or 30 years of possibly getting a win and pulling it out of the fire. Who knows? Maybe not, because Martinez was scrapping back. There's lots of fights you could think of if they was 15 rounders, or if they wasn't stopped so early. Who knows? What about David Price and Audley Harrison? Wow. If if the referee who officiated Willard versus Dempsey was officiating that bout now, I don't know what would have happened to Audley Harrison, because that referee on Saturday saved Audley's life big time, and it was excellent officiating. And I suppose there's an argument or a discussion to have whether we would rather dispute and debate over a few what could be deemed as premature decisions, or be discussing how Audley died in the ring or ended up like Meldrick Taylor after David Price landed the guillotine. You know what I mean? Today's world is far more sanitized. You know what I mean? Or at least we like to think it is. You know, we have political correctness and all that shit, and civil rights and laws, and, you know what I mean, all that shit there. And the world is still fucked up. We know that. But them days, it was just open season. They would write signs: no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. You know what I mean? No Jews. Just tell you straight. Yeah, tell you straight. You know what I mean? It was a more raw, realer time. Like, don't get me wrong. I know most of you have the best of intentions when you tell Roy Jones to retire. And you know, on me, I have to have a different view from everybody else, because that's what I'm like. I mean, you always hear me, I don't think Roy Jones should retire if he doesn't want to. He should carry on and fulfill his destiny, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, forever, right? But I'm going to come from a different angle today. I'm going to come from a different angle. In the last 8 years, Roy Jones has only been in the ring 13 times. 13. Yeah? It's not that much compared to them guys. Them days, right? It's just not that much. Freddie Mills, in his first 2 years as a pro, was in the ring 50 times. 50 times. And no, I'm not trying to say everybody he fought was Bernard Hopkins, yeah? Freddie Mills is a former world light heavyweight champion and British champion from Britain in the 40s. And I think he probably retired in the 50s. Or no, probably 40s was Freddie Mills' time, you know? And I'm not saying everybody he fought was a Bernard Hopkins, but what you have to realize is them days, you couldn't cherry pick. You couldn't cherry pick. If you was going to put on a show for people, you had to put on a show, yeah? You had to put on evenly matched contests, right?
I don't feel that we are being exploited in the slightest, because when I got into boxing, and we both got into boxing, we knew what the scar was basically. We knew there's a risk of brain damage. We know there's a risk of detached retinas, etc. But it's our choice.
Brandon Rios, the man whose idea of defense is using his face to block his opponent's punches from touching more breeze. You know what I mean? Right? He's had 31 fights in his career so far. 31 fights. I don't think Brandon is going to have more than 10 fights before he calls it a day. I don't see that happening. I don't, you know what I mean? By that time, yeah, if he hasn't got really beaten up badly, he's just going to fill up his resume a little more, fix up his bank balance, and he's probably going to get out of there, yeah? If you was to talk to Robert Garcia, he would say, well, I don't want to see Brandon get hurt in there, man. I want to see Brandon get out there with his marbles, look after his family, and enjoy the rest of his life and his money, right? If Brandon's going to carry on after his supposed expiry date, he'll have to do it without Robert Garcia. Robert Garcia's not going to let him do that. There's no way. There's no way he's going to allow that under his watch. No way.
It was like both guys took a lot of shots. Alvarado even landed some shots that had a little bit of blood trickling. The crowd was oohing. I mean, were you ever concerned or at all?
I talked to my fighters, and of course I got to be concerned. I love my fighters, but I talked to them, and the minute they respond the way Brandon does, you know, when I ask him, you know, how do you feel his punch? Is he hurting you? Right when he says, fuck, no, you know, if I don't feel his punch, you know, he's landing punches, but that don't mean he's hurting me. You know, then I'm okay with that. I said, okay, then let's, you know, go do what you got to do. And the fight that we did was a perfect fight. I think we, you know, Brandon more than anybody else deserves, you know, credit now.
Now, we saw Brandon Rios yesterday, yeah? I tipped Brandon Rios to win by knockout yesterday, right? When I done my little prediction for Noshiaka and Donaire, I got it wrong. I thought maybe that guy could outbox Donaire. I wasn't too sure though. I was quite positive with the Brandon Rios fight because I saw it like this. It didn't really matter if Brandon Rios was behind on points. This guy said he was going to bang it out with Brandon. And I know Alvarado's tough, but Brandon is a psycho. Didn't you see when he went back to the corner? He told Robert Garcia, I love this. The guy was cracking him with shots. He went back and he meant it. I love this. Right? Basically, if you're going to go in the ring with Brandon Rios, you have to either be a psycho or slick. You got two choices. You got two choices, right? And just touching about from a spectator standpoint, I don't think you guys were upset that the bout was stopped because it was premature. I think most of us were more upset because we wanted the fight to carry on. You know, that fight was wow. You know, infighting, boy. Them guys bought it. They bought the infighting aspect of boxing on a serious level. That was sick. That was sick, you know? And, yeah, Brandon overcame Alvarado. And, yeah, he's all the warrior that he said he was in the post-fight. Yeah, but let's look at it a little deeper. Since 2004, Brandon Rios has had 31 fights in 8 years. 31 fights. Now, even by my very base grasp of mathematics, I hate doing maths here. I mean, he's only had about 4 fights a year. That's what that averages out to. 4 fights a year. And his first 12 to 15 fights or whatever were 4-rounders, 6-rounders, and 8-rounders. And most of them early opponents would have been cherry-picked. That's just the truth. That's just the truth. Yeah? So as tough as he is in the ring, yeah, his schedule is nowhere near as grueling in comparison to fighters in the 40s and 50s. And let's stick with Freddie Mills in the 40s, who had 50 fights in his first 2 years, yeah? After his first year as a pro, he was fighting 10 and 12 rounders, yeah? So, despite how aggressive we see Brandon fighting, and we all know that style can leave you blunted. I mentioned 2 fighters in a video the other day. They both fought Marvin Hagler for his world title in the 80s. Mustafa Hamsho and One Roldan. Basically, they just used to walk you down, right? Walk through your punches and march you down. That was their style. That was their style. And Hagler blunted both of them. After Hagler fought both of them. And they probably had maybe a harder route than what Brandon had. You know, the 80s still had a lot of the ethics of the 70s and 60s in terms of facing stiff opposition, right? And I'm not saying Brandon's had it easy. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is Brandon is not in as much danger as we think he is. And neither is Roy Jones. Yeah? Because we have to go by averages and percentages. The fact that Roy has only fought 13 times in 8 years shouldn't place him in as much danger as the fighters back then who were fighting so often. Even if they wasn't getting knocked out as much as Roy. The fact that they're going in the ring so much, that just jeopardizes their health and well-being by going in there so much.
Now, it's my opinion that Freddie Mills never fully recovered from the injuries sustained in that fight. Certainly, for a spell, he had terribly bad headaches, and he had some trouble with his vision. Now, the truth of the matter is that 3 weeks to the day after that terrific fight with Lesnovich, one of the most punishing ever seen in this country, he was in the ring in the same arena, Haringey, in a 12-round fight against Bruce Woodcock, the heavyweight champion.
Despite their recent defeats at the hands of American boxers, a capacity house at the Haringey Arena fully justifies promoter Jack Solomon's judgment in staging a match between Britain's leading heavyweights Bruce Woodcock and Freddie Mills.
After the pounding he received from Lesnovich, today Freddie Mills would never have been allowed to fight again in 3 weeks. The danger was compounded by matching him with Woodcock, a much heavier man, because Freddie had run out of opponents in the light heavyweight division.
I just love the voices of them British newscasters in the Pathé News days. It's just fucking excellent.
Let me just break down some of that transcript. Freddie Mills had just challenged. This was his first world title challenge against the American fighter Gus Lesnovich. Lesnovich came over to the UK to defend his title. He floored Freddie about 2 or 3 times early. Brutal knockdowns as well, some hard knockdowns. Freddie survived that and he staged a comeback. You know, he was doing fairly well. He was getting back into the fight. Like he bruised up my guy pretty badly, but the damage was done already. And Lesnovich stopped him late in the fight. It was a late round stoppage. Okay, a brutal light heavyweight title fight. In 3 weeks' time, after fighting a world title fight, he goes in and fights Bruce Woodcock, who I'm not going to box rec, but I know at some stage he was the top British heavyweight in the country. Yeah? A heavyweight. Woodcock at some stage was definitely a British champion, right? And he was quite a powerful man. You know what I'm saying? And Mills managed to go the distance. And I think he was in the ring about less than 2 months again after that. And he fought another 3 times for the year. The next year he had about 6 or 7 fights. One was against Lloyd Marshall, an African-American fighter, and not no ordinary African-American fighter. He was, I'm not sure if he was in the murderer's row, but he was that kind of level of fighter, Lloyd Marshall. A serious operator. I saw the fight with him and Freddie Mills. Go and look it up, it's on there, and you'll see how good Lloyd Marshall was. Really good fighter. And I think probably one fight after the Lloyd Marshall fight, Mills fights for the European Championship. And he wins that in the same year. That's unheard of today. A fighter either challenging or defending a world championship or any belt and then fights 3 weeks after. Let's take Ricky Burns recently. After his fight with Kevin Mitchell. He wasn't sore after that bout. It lasted 3 rounds. Kevin barely touched him. Right? He was probably fit to fight the next day. He could have probably had another bout the same night. Right? And they've said that Ricky should be in the ring by December. That's almost a full 2 months after that fight there. Yeah? A full 2 months. And that's quick. And by today, that's quick. And I'm not even sure if that's going to happen. They're saying they want him in the ring by December, but there's been nothing penciled as far as I know. You know? More than likely, he probably won't fight till New Year. You get what I'm saying? After Muhammad Ali's first fight with Ken Norton, years later, I'm not sure how long ago it was after, a reporter quizzed him about the fight. And Ali said if he had knew that his jaw was broken, he would have quit right there and then. The reporter sort of looked at him like, are you crazy? Would you really mean that? And he said, yeah, what? You think I'm going to stay inside the ring and risk permanent injury? You know what I mean? And endanger my well-being? When he said that, that was in the 70s more than likely. And by this time, the medical profession had all fell in line. The train of thought was joined up. They all agreed and they all knew the correlation between boxing and head injuries. They all knew. Yeah? And if we travel even further on than that, into the mid-90s, right? After Roy Jones fought this guy named Furman Chinro. It's like I was trying to find an interview on YouTube everywhere and I couldn't find it. It would have just made it easier if I played it. But I distinctively remember the interview, right? From the 90s. And I'm paraphrasing Roy. Roy outpointed the guy fairly easy. It was a fairly easy points decision. I remember he floored the guy. Because the guy was no great fighter, you know what I mean? To be honest, Roy should have stopped him. Should have stopped him. And the guy who was talking to him, I guess he knew that too. Roy justified his performance by saying, well, if you guys pay me enough money, then you get a knockout. But right now, I'm just going to do enough to win, and I'm happy with that. Because who's going to look after me if this guy catches me with a knockout punch because I'm fighting reckless? Who's going to look after me if I suffer a real bad injury? That was his attitude. That was his attitude. Now, when he said that at the time, I remember a lot of the boxing publications were frowning upon that kind of attitude. They frowned upon it. And he didn't exactly make friends with what he was saying. But what you have to realize is, he said that in the 90s. possibly, I don't know, 30, 25 years after them findings were solidified as fact. And me and you and Roy Jones, we're products of our times. Most of our thinking is done in the parameters of what is thought to be okay. Yeah? So even though what he said was frowned upon, he still got work after. He still got big fights. Because people understood, even though it's not exactly in standing with what a great champion is supposed to say, yeah, that safety first attitude that he displayed when he was talking, that's not really, you know, John L. Sullivan, yeah, I mean, or I don't know, Rocky Marciano bleeding his brains out and shit, like, you know, just the macho image that we're supposed to just take as a norm for boxing. He's still got work. He's still got big fights and big paydays after that. If he had said that in the 40s or the 50s, he might never have worked again. Yeah, it's the truth. That's the truth. He might never have worked again. You didn't hear fighters complaining about anything because they were just fighters. Most of them didn't display any individual personalities, you know. Most of the times we heard boxers, them days, speaking outside of the ring. They was talking about something boxing related. That kind of changed until Muhammad Ali came along. He started fighting for civil rights. And trust me, there was a lot of black actors and athletes and prominent black people who agreed with whatever Malcolm X was saying about the condition of his people. But none of them had the balls to walk with Malcolm. He did. Ali did. He took a stance against the war. He told everyone what he was going to do to his opponents, etc., etc., you know? And don't get it twisted, you know? There was people like Paul Robeson, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and Jim Brown who did stand up, yeah? Now, we're talking about boxing, right? And Ali was one of a kind.
People do say I'm cocky. Some say I need a good whooping. Some say I talk too much. But anything that I say, I'm willing to back up. And for an example, the other night I predicted that I would knock out this Banks in 4 rounds, and I did. And I have a fight coming up the 28th of this month, this Don Warner, and I also predicted he must fall also.
He was more three-dimensional. He was the beginning of the three-dimensional athlete. Yeah? What's ironic, though, is how Ali said what he said and how Roy said what he said. And Ali and Roy still went to fight on well past their primes, you know what I mean? And Roy is still doing so now, you get what I'm saying? So that's kind of irony, I guess the word is, you know what I mean? But you see, it's that kind of attitude that started not just letting boxers, but athletes all around the board realize they're not just pieces of meat to be used. If they're good enough, they can start demanding their own fees, yeah? They can start dictating certain terms to ease their way through the pitfalls that come with the professional burdens, you know what I mean, of their chosen careers. Whereas fighters back when, you know what I mean, the early part of the 19th century and the 40s and the 50s, they just went in there, probably got ganked by the promoters and managers a lot of times. You see some of the old films, you get what I'm saying? After their careers, they were never heard about again. And more than likely, there was no mediums for them to voice their disapproval if they did have any grievances. You know what I'm saying? They were just forgot about. They were just used like pieces of meat. So I guess what it is there is a balance to be struck. You know? I don't know what the balance is. Because look at Floyd. How much times has Floyd fought in the last 5 years? Not many. I just box wrecked it. He's fought 11 times in 5 years. You know what I mean? Like, so that averages out to, I hate doing this, 11 times, 10, 5. 5 years. That's 2 fights a year. That's 2 fights a year. You know what I mean? He's a 5-time or 6-time, whatever it is, world champion. Depends what you count as whatever is a title, you know what I mean? Does it really matter? You know? Do we really expect him to do like what Henry Armstrong and Sugar Ray Robinson do? And like, say, fight 10 journeymen on the trot in non-title fights just to boost up their bank balance until a big money title defense comes up. Because that's a pattern you will see in a lot of them old fighters. Robinson, Armstrong, Bob Foster, etc., etc. Factors like health and safety, the fact that there's so many belts out there, the compensation culture, the nanny state type of culture we live in. In a way, you could say the expectations of modern day life. I mean, you get people becoming famous for doing nothing, for sitting in the Big Brother house, reality TV stars, famous for nothing. There's 2 primary schools either side of where I live. And when I pass any of them, whether it's closing or opening time, there's 4x4s, cars out there everywhere with parents picking up the children. When I used to go to school, there was no cars because everybody walked. Everybody walked, right? There might be 1 or 2 kids, and it always looks strange to see them. They look like royal family or something, you get what I'm saying? And when parents did come to pick up their children, they was either going out somewhere or it was an emergency. One of the two, you know? There's an argument to say modern day life won't allow fighters today to be as heroic as they was back then. You could make that argument. I mean, back then, for your kids to get into university, you know, you had to talk like that. live in the posh areas. You couldn't get in. You know what I mean? You got the bog standard education, wherever it was, you know what I mean? Where they made you take that test if you go any further in school and shit. It was called the 11 plus. And that determined if you went to grammar school or secondary modern school or a technical school. And if you didn't get it, like, they would probably just encourage you just to, you know what I mean, leave school at 15 or whatever and go learn an apprenticeship, you know? But these days they try and tell kids, oh yeah, you should go university. It's no point every kid going to university, but that's the kind of world we live in. It's just political correctness gone fucking mad. You know what I mean? You can even gauge, like, how a boxer, like how a boxing manager or a promoter would try to lure a kid into the game compared to back then. You could even gauge that to army recruitment. Like, Second World War, they used to get, Lord Kitchener, he'd stick his finger up in that poster. Your country needs you. Yeah? And like, they just have platitudes like that, you know? And you're dealing with a time in the world where the citizens of most countries didn't question the big hand of big government. They just went along with it. It's not like today. I mean, you go on the internet, it's just pure conspiracy theories and talk of anarchy. You know what I mean? It's a different time. You know what I'm saying? So now these days, you know, the army offer inducements, tax breaks, education. They give you a whole lot of leave, etc., etc. You know, and it's the same with the boxing management. You know, they can't treat the boxers like pieces of meat, because one thing for sure, the boxing commissions in most countries are more stringent than back in the day about handing out licenses for promoters, trainers, and boxers, etc. You know, unless you go into certain parts in the world, take America for instance, you know what I mean, where you get them states like where they probably filmed the Chainsaw Massacre and the Devil's Rejects, you know, like Oklahoma. I remember Oklahoma back in the day, you'd get fighters with 80 and old records, and then you think, oh man, this guy must be something, and then you realize they just do some arms house operations, you know what I mean, like people who shouldn't have been licensed, you know what I mean, are getting in the ring, stuffing up the guy's record, and it's a whole heap of mad shit. You get what I'm saying? But on the whole, they just can't get away with a lot of the things they used to do. You get what I'm saying? Like, let's just say a boxing manager is even signing a kid who, I don't want to say the word mediocre, but just the average fighter, you know? You know, even he gets a contract. Maybe not a great contract, but it's a contract that has to be legally binded by a lawyer and shit like that. You know, they used to get around all shit like that back in the day. You know, back in the day, even in the UK, there was kids who managed to get boxing licenses when they were 14 and 15. You know, and if they was in the flyweight division, it was even easier for them to do it because, you know, most of the lower weight boxers, they look young anyway, you know. And even when you go Mexico, what age did Chavez Sr. start boxing? I can't remember. It was young. And even Canelo, you know, even today you get a lot of Mexican fighters who start really young. Sometimes they get in there before the legal age to turn pro. I don't know what that is. I haven't got the exact age to hand. But it does happen. So, you know, a lot of the times when we discuss different eras, we have to realize that we are bound by the facts that we're just products of our time. You get what I'm saying? You see, it's not like other sports where there's a league table and you're committed to meeting your quota. If there's 20 teams in the league, then you know you've got 18 matches to compete in that season or whatever it is. Maybe I got that wrong. My maths isn't my strong point. So if I'm getting all these maths equations wrong in the video, don't even write nothing wrong. I'm going to delete your comment because I'm shit at maths, right? But you get what I'm saying. You have to meet your quota of whatever is there. Like boxing, you just fight whenever you want. If you can. There's different reasons for fighting whenever you want. In your early stages, you need the pro experience. So you have to build a little bit of a rhythm up. Like when Tyson started, like he was knocking people out every week when he started. Because, you know, you need to blood yourself in. So you have to do the shit regular. Or like Chris Eubanks Jr.'s opponent on Saturday, the Latvian fighter. The commentator, he said the Latvian more than likely tries to fight every week. He's a journeyman. He's a gatekeeper. He's a journeyman, right? He tries to fight every week. So his main goal to fight often is not to get stopped. Because if he gets stopped, he gets suspended for whatever period the suspension is. Yeah? I mean, he wants to pay certain bills. So, you know, he just fights to go the distance like he did on Saturday. And that's what he does. Even the journeyman take advantage of the standards of today. Even the journeyman. Think about it, right? There's been a couple of journeymen in the UK. I'm not going to bother dig up. I mean, it's too much researching, right? Just this year, who the British Boxing Board of Control have pulled up and said, yo, what's with all the losses? What's going on? And they've been suspended. Right? Years ago, a journeyman who was a serious journeyman, right? A serious journeyman, not just some... Because there's a skill to being a journeyman. There's a skill. He didn't have to worry about the board calling him up because, like we've went through already, the standards were more lax in them days. But if he had a reputation as being some bum who's just trying to hold and grip his opponent and not make a fight of it, and just go to the canvas when he gets hit by a piece of breeze from a punch, let alone a full connection, no promoters would fuck with him. Yeah? So journeymen them days would have to go hard. They didn't have that option because word would spread around, yo, this guy's a bum. And he wouldn't get no work. Might not even pay him. You know what I'm saying? And what you have to realize is in the UK, there was an incentive for journeymen because there used to be a thing called nobbins. Used to get nobbins fights. So that means if you put on a really good scrap, the crowd would throw money into the ring, into a hat or a jacket or whatever. And that would be shared between the boxers. Yeah? So even fighters who are gatekeepers or what we call journeymen would have to put a show on. Or if they could choose not to, but you know. Them guys are fighting, literally fighting for money. So, trust me, they're going to go for the nobbins. They're going to go for the nobbins. And in certain arenas, back in the day, the Nobbins could come up to a good little fee to supplement the fighter's purse. You know what I mean? So if you got time, go look that up, Nobbins. And then we can go through the reasons and why fighters might not have to or want to fight frequently. I don't know nothing about UFC, but I either read or I heard about John Jones when he cancelled that bout, which caused such a big stir. And yeah, by the way, UFC fans, racist, okay? Right. Apparently, he cancelled the bout and he wouldn't take the other bout with a substitute opponent because he already trained to face one style. And from what I've heard, that is why he is so effective. He's able to go into his training camp and devise all the counters and prerequisites to shut down his opponent because he's focused on that opponent. Yeah? So, should he have just said, fuck it, I'm going to go in the ring and fight regardless, even though he hasn't studied that opponent? Should he have? I don't know. I'm not saying he should have or not. I'm just asking the question. Because obviously there's other fighters who would have done that. But he's a champion. Most of them fighters who would have done that do not have the same stakes to lose or to gamble with that he does. So yeah, you might see a lot of challengers who are just trying to get a break or a shot who would do that. But he's a champion. Should he do that? Go in blind, possibly get his arm broken, then he's sidelined for months. Because his strength is, from what I'm hearing, is diagnosing his opponent in training camp, and then he's really good. And like I said, there's other fighters, I don't know from whatever standing, who can probably just go in blind and fight fairly effectively. And obviously he must be in some kind of financial comfort zone where he can do that. So I don't know what the balance is, to be honest. I really don't know. I don't know what the balance is. Because there's a lot of people who said he should have just fought. And there's people on the other side who say, no, why should he waste his whole training camp? Why should he do that? And risk a L on his record. You see, I don't know. It's just the balance of applying old school values to new school ones. I don't know quite what it is. I just don't know. I'm not trying to be facetious. I just don't know what it is. Like I argued against European boxing news about a league table for boxing. But maybe there needs to be one. Maybe there needs to be one. So that way, nobody could dispute anything, yeah? Because if you was given 4 fights that you have to have for that year or whatever, and you won all 4 against however they devise your competition and the league table and the status of opponents, it's kind of like Andre Ward winning the Super 6, yeah? That's undisputed. I don't care what anybody was to say, oh, they only had shit people in there, so... No. Whoever was in there was supposed to be in there, yeah? If Lucien Bute really wanted in, him and his promoter, they could have made far more noise than they did, and they didn't. So don't tell me that, no. And maybe that's where boxing needs to go. Maybe elite professional boxing needs to stay in a Super 6 at all times. If a boxer needs a break, he says, okay, you just opt out of that Super 6 and maybe you can go in the next one in a year and a half and you can take a couple of non-title fights just to tick you over until then. And if you're not in a Super 6 tournament or some type of unification tournament, you cannot be in the pound for pound rankings. Bottom line, that's how it needs to run. Yeah, I mean, they should have a Super 6 running all the time. Maybe that's the way that has to go. I don't know. But I'm going to end this video here and say peace out. Peace.